Hello and welcome to this edition of Arirang News, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Kim Min-ji, filling in for Kwon Jang-ho. President Moon Jae-in is in Singapore, and there's much attention on his summit diplomacy and whether he will be able to provide a breakthrough in the stalled communication between North Korea and the U.S. on denuclearization. Following a one-on-one with Russian President Vladimir Putin, he sat down for talks with U.S. Vice President Mike Pence on Thursday, in which Moon said that to realize lasting peace on the Korean peninsula, inter-Korean relations should move forward together with North Korea-U.S. relations. Will his efforts be able to stimulate the denuclearization process and peace initiative? We'll have an expert in the studio later to give us an analysis, but first let's turn to Devin Whiting at Arirang's News Center for a look at the day's headlines. Devin.
Hi, Min-ji. It's a big day here in Korea for more than 500,000 young people hoping to go to university. They're taking the college entrance exam, called in Korean 수능. The test will have a huge impact on the rest of their lives, so the whole country is trying to make sure it goes as smoothly as possible for them. Yoon-je has this report.
Every year, South Korean students take the College Scholastic Ability Test, or 수능. On Thursday morning, nearly 600,000 students, mostly high school seniors, began their college entrance exam at 1,190 test sites nationwide.
My son told me this morning that he would just relax and do his best. He has been putting in his best effort so far. I hope he'll do his best on the exam after years of hard work.
The exams consist of Korean language, mathematics, English, Korean history, and other subjects. Students can choose to take either social science or natural science too. The exams are considered one of the important tests in students' lives, and they often spend years studying for them. The results will determine which universities they will be going to next year. Many Koreans believe a college shapes a student's future, so many study hard to get into prestigious schools. On the day of the 수능 test, the whole country supports the test takers. Extra public transportation is put on during morning rush hours, which are extended by 2 hours from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. People begin their work an hour later to reduce morning traffic jams for the students, and the police are on standby to give free rides for any students who need them. The country's stock markets will open and close an hour later. Traffic is controlled near the test sites, and flights are put on hold in the afternoon for about 30 minutes during the English listening comprehension section to minimize disturbance. It is an annual tradition for groups of juniors to gather around at the test sites early in the morning to support the seniors on their big day. They sing, hand out chocolates, and wish them good luck.
I came early this morning to cheer for our seniors so that they can do their best for all their hard work over the last 3 years.
This year's exam results will be announced in the first week of December and will be submitted along with the students' university application forms. Yoon-je, Arirang News.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in, now in Singapore, met with the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, on Thursday. And in their meeting, President Moon told Pence that relations between the two Koreas should move forward together with those between the U.S. and the North. Inter-Korean ties have continued apace recently, but dialogue between Pyongyang and Washington has appeared to stall. President Moon said it was the strong alliance between South Korea and the U.S. that drew North Korea into dialogue in the first place, and the alliance, he said, will stay strong. Moon and Pence agreed that the next summit between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and President Trump will help lay a strong foundation for denuclearization and peace. South Korea's ambassador to the United States, Yoon-je, says the high-level talks between North Korea and the U.S. that were canceled last week are expected to be back on soon. Jo told reporters on Wednesday that Pyongyang and Washington are now working on setting a new date for the meeting. And he said the second Kim-Trump summit, highly likely to be discussed at that meeting, will probably be held early next year. He said that South Korea will continue to mediate to make it happen. Also, according to Jo, a new working group of South Korean and U.S. officials will hold their first meeting on North Korea issues soon. The United States has been firm on the need for countries to continue implementing sanctions on North Korea to make the regime denuclearize. Washington is clear about what it expects from China, but a bipartisan congressional panel has concluded that Beijing is not doing enough. Lee Nak-yon reports.
Releasing its annual report on Wednesday, the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission noted that China, appears to have already started to loosen enforcement of sanctions on the regime. This comes despite Beijing recently agreeing to additional UN Security Council sanctions. The report said that when China enforced sanctions more thoroughly in the past, it led to a significant decrease in North Korean exports to China. However, the Commission says China's enforcement measures still have holes, including the use of ship-to-ship crude oil transfers. It added Beijing always leaves key lifelines in place for North Korea, most notably oil exports, which it believes averts a complete regime collapse. The report comes as tensions have spiked between the world's two largest economies over trade and tariffs issues. Established in 2000, the Commission has reported on China's economic and military rise, including recommendations for counteractions such as trade sanctions. Yoon-je, Arirang News.
In the U.S. House of Representatives, the Democrats have picked up another seat, according to NBC News. A Korean-American, Andy Kim, who has never held political office before. NBC says he's beaten two-term Republican Tom MacArthur in the 3rd District of New Jersey. He will become the first Korean-American to ever represent New Jersey in Congress when he's sworn in January. He'll also be the first Korean-American to serve in Congress in 20 years. Kim was a national security official during the Obama administration and has a Ph.D. in international relations from Oxford University. He could be joined in Congress by another Korean-American, but on the other side of the aisle, Republican Young Kim is in a race in California that's still too close to call. 3 South Korean companies will plead guilty in the United States, according to the Justice Department, to conspiring to rig the price of fuel sold to the U.S. military bases in Korea. Those companies are SK Energy, GS Caltex, and Hanjin Transportation, and they've agreed to pay a total of $236 million in civil damages and criminal fines. The Justice Department said they conspired to suppress competition and fix prices in what was a strategically critical region for the U.S. for over a decade, from 2005 to 2016. The settlement was part of a larger investigation involving other companies. Of the 3 firms, SK and GS will each pay over $100 million, and Hanjin will pay around $7.5 million. The South Korean government is pushing for another round of deregulation to help new industries prosper. In a weekly meeting with cabinet ministers on Thursday, Prime Minister Lee Nak-yon said the government is overhauling 82 regulations in new sectors, including hydrogen-fueled vehicles, drones, virtual reality, and biopharmaceuticals. The PM underscored the plight of the hydrogen fuel car sector in particular, saying there are fewer than 600 hydrogen cars in the entire country due to strict regulations on the installation of charging stations. He urged the ministers to take measures of their own to get rid of red tape, stressing the potential of those new businesses to create jobs. Speaking of job creation, it's become the government's top priority, and some companies are apparently on board with that. South Korean industry tracker CEO Score has announced a ranking of companies based on their net increase of workers in the first 3 quarters of 2018. The one that hired the most was CJ Corporation, a food and entertainment conglomerate, with an increase of about 6,000 workers on year. Out of companies that do business in a single industry, on top was Samsung Electronics, with an on-year jump of roughly 3,000 workers. CEO Score surveyed around 300 companies. Their total number of employees was up nearly 10,000 from a year earlier. I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
On the sidelines of the ASEAN-related summits in Singapore, President Moon sat down with the U.S. Vice President and discussed their commitment to pushing ahead with diplomacy with North Korea. Our Shin Se-min, traveling with the President, reports from the city-state.
In Singapore Thursday, President Moon Jae-in and U.S. Vice President Mike Pence reaffirmed their country's strong alliance of 65 years as they discussed the latest diplomacy related to North Korea. Meeting on the sidelines of the ASEAN Annual Regional Summit, Moon and Pence held their first face-to-face since February and the first since talks were called off last week between the North and the U.S. that would have been about the next summit between Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Donald Trump. President Moon said it was the South Korea-U.S. alliance that brought North Korea into dialogue in the first place and made the progress so far possible. The three countries, he said, should move forward together.
앞으로도 한반도의 완전한 비핵화와 항구적인 평화를 하기 위해서 남북 관계와 또 북미 관계가 함께 이렇게 발전해 나갈 수 있도록 한미 양국 간의 긴밀한 협력과 공조가 있기를 바랍니다.
To that, Pence said he looks forward to the next meeting between North Korea's Kim Jong-un and President Trump, and that Trump believes a second summit will lay a strong foundation for the joint objective of the region's long-term denuclearization.
But much work remains, and I look forward to discussing with you the plans for another summit between the President and Chairman Kim, and how we can work even more closely together in the days ahead to ensure peace and security come at last to the Korean Peninsula.
He added the U.S. will continue to work toward the ultimate objective of complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization while maintaining a consistent stance on the regime's nuclear weapons. And Pence reportedly asked President Moon to keep dialogue going between the two Koreas, something he's an expert on. What wasn't on the table, though, was perhaps lifting the sanctions on North Korea to help speed up its denuclearization, something President Moon was aiming for when he met last month with European leaders. Still, the Moon-Pence meeting this Thursday reaffirmed that they're on the same trajectory when it comes to denuclearization. Shin Se-min, Arirang News, Singapore.
And for more in the studio today is Dr. Woo Jung-yap, a research fellow from the Sejong Institute. It's good to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me today.
A closely watched part of President Moon Jae-in's itinerary this time was his bilateral meeting with U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, like we've just heard in the report. Pence is known to have said there's still a lot to do and the U.S. will continue to make efforts to achieve the ultimate goal of complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization. Now, CVID is back on the table. How should we be looking at the situation?
So using the term of CVID by the Vice President Pence does not really mean that United States government is changing its policy direction. So when President Moon Jae-in visited the European countries, all the statements shared by European countries were using the term CVID instead of like FFVD, which is used by U.S. government these days. So U.S. government is using the term FFVD when it comes to the bilateral talks with North Korea. But when U.S. is talking and when multilateral setting is, when there's a multilateral settings, the CVID is more frequently used because UN sanction, UN resolutions use the term CVID, and according to the UN resolution, all member countries have a obligation to comply with the UN resolutions. So my Vice President Pence came to ASEAN conferences this time to ask all member countries in Asia to comply with the UN sanctions. That is why Vice President Pence used the term CVID instead of FFVD. So there is no real policy change from the US side by using the term CVID.
Now, there's no mention yet of whether the issue of sanctions was brought up, but Seoul and Washington have somewhat been on diverging lines when it comes to sanctions relief for North Korea. South Korea has noted the need for easing of sanctions in accordance with the progressive steps towards denuclearization, but the U.S. continues to say that it will exert maximum pressure on the North until complete denuclearization. Do you think the two sides will be able to find common ground?
I think it looks like that North Korea is also demanding U.S. to ease the sanctions as a corresponding measures to the things that they already had done. But the thing is that U.S. government believes that the pressure, economic pressure and the diplomatic pressure, especially those sanctions, are the key element to bring the North Korea into the negotiation table. U.S. does not have any intention to ease the sanctions. However, if the working level talks begin between North Korea and the U.S., and then everything will go up on the table to discuss, then even if U.S. government is now saying that they are not going to ease the sanctions until the full denuclearization of North Korea, it can be discussed between North Korea and the United States. So if North Korea takes the significant steps toward the denuclearization, U.S. can ease the sanctions according to the level of the measures taken by North Korea.
Now, it comes at a time when denuclearization talks between Pyongyang and Washington have seemingly stalled, and prospects worsened after a report on North Korea's secretive missile bases. Reuters reported that Pence said that Trump will meet North Korean leader Kim Jong-un next year. Can we say that the U.S. is indicating that the talks are still on track?
Yes, but the thing is that the condition for the talks between Trump-Kim is a little bit different from the June summit in Singapore. So now we have this report from the CSIS, which revealed that those hidden missile bases in North Korea, but that report is based on the commercial satellite that the civilians can use. So assuming that the U.S. government and South Korean government already knew the existence of those missile bases by military satellites or intelligence satellite, they are having these talks with North Korea, even though they already knew that there is missile bases in North Korea. So revealing of those hidden missile bases from the think tank does not really have impact on the prospect of talks between U.S. and North Korea. Only thing that matters now is that how to size or reconcile with regard to the differences that they now have.
So you said the U.S. is bringing up the CVID in multi-level talks. Would you say there has been any changes on the stance in the U.S. government since the midterm elections, or do you think there will be a change apparent later on down the road?
So I think President Trump does not have intention to go back to 2017 when he put military tensions on the Korean Peninsula to bring the Chairman Kim to the negotiation table. Because as North Korea has not done any more provocations with its nuclear and missile capabilities, it's difficult for U.S. to bring up another sanctions onto North Korea. And if North Korea does not make any provocations, then it's going to be politically very difficult for President Trump to use other measures than diplomacy. So I think that President Trump is going to continue to use the diplomacy and the economic sanctions as his main tool to deal with North Korea. But the thing is that if North Korea has not responded positively to U.S. request on having working level talks, then President Trump is not as he said, he's not in a rush to have a talks with North Korea. So if North Korea is not responding to U.S. requests, then the situation of standstill can continue for a fairly long time.
Staying with President Moon's summit diplomacy, he also sat down for a one-on-one with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin on Wednesday. Now, the two sides are known to have talked comprehensively on the terms and conditions of easing sanctions on the North. And Putin was quoted as telling Moon that there should be reciprocal measures should there be progress towards denuclearization. What significance or impact do you think this will have on the North's denuclearization process?
So I think that this kind of talks could send a message to Chairman Kim that South Korean president is working to help them to have a much fair ground with the United States when it comes to the bilateral negotiation between U.S. and North Korea. And Russia is the permanent member of UN Security Council. So even though U.S. can veto any move by China or Russia with regard to the UN resolutions on sanctions, but it has political meaning that China and Russia is on the side with North Korea. So I think that South Korean president is trying to take advantage of this opportunity to send a message to Chairman Kim that international community is watching North Korea to move toward the denuclearization. And when North Korea made that move, we are ready to help them to get easing the sanctions.
Now, President Moon says he will actively consider inviting North Korean leader Kim Jong-un to a special summit with the leaders of ASEAN, which Seoul hopes to host next year. Now, should Kim accept the invite, it will be an opportunity for him to visit Seoul as promised by the year's end, as well as make his debut on the international stage. What's the likelihood of this, and would you say there are any constraints to this?
So we really don't know the prospect of Chairman Kim's visiting Seoul or Chairman Kim's participating in the ASEAN summit next year. So Indonesian president yesterday mentioned during the conference that it would be great if ASEAN can invite Chairman Kim to the summit next year. And President Moon said that it's a good idea to consider positively. But the thing is that we have now these stalled talks between the United States and North Korea with regard to North Korea's nuclear weapons. So unless there's a progress, it's going to be very difficult for international community to accept Chairman Kim to the international conference. At the same time, Chairman Kim will know that there's nothing much he can get if there's no progress between U.S. and North Korea with the denuclearization. So I think whether Chairman Kim is going to visit Seoul or whether Chairman Kim is going to participate in the summit next year all depends on what kind of progress that we are going to see between U.S. and North Korea.
Shifting our gears a little bit, now on Wednesday evening, Korea time, a high-level delegation from North Korea crossed over the border to the south to attend an international conference. Now, the delegation initially drew attention because it included key officials that's been part of inter-Korean dialogue or the North Korea-Washington dialogue. But Kim Sung-hae, the head of North Korea's United Front Department, was absent, citing personal reasons. Should we say this is a coincidence, or how should we be looking at this?
So North Korean delegation did not officially mention what's the reason behind this. So we don't know what exactly is the reason that Ms. Kim is not coming to Seoul this time. But as we saw before, that she accompanied Vice Chairman Kim Yong-chol when he met President Trump in May. So I think she played a very important role when it comes to North Korea with the U.S. relations. So one guess might be that because of the cancellation of the high-level talks between U.S. and North Korea, she might need to do something in North Korea. And also there are much media attention is given to her visit instead of giving attention to the head of delegation, Mr. Lee Jong-hyuk, the chairman of Asia Pacific Peace Committee of North Korea. So maybe what she is going to do, who she is going to meet, draws much more media attention than necessary. So I think that might be too much for her to come to Seoul this time.
Now, according to a Korean daily, Seoul and Washington will launch their working group on Pyongyang's denuclearization next week. Do you think this form of dialogue will be able to stimulate the denuclearization talks, as well as provide steam for the joint projects that the two Koreas are trying to pursue?
I think that for the working group between South Korea and the U.S., we are talking like two sides of the coin. On the one side, that U.S. government wants to know what is really going on inside the South Korean government with regard to its policy toward North Korea. That is why State Department of United States wants to meet the people from the Ministry of Unification as well as the Blue House. So maybe United States government wants to discuss with all the government bureaus of South Korea when it comes to South Korea's policy toward North Korea. But at the same time, if the talks at the working group is really going smooth, then I think we can get much more understanding from the U.S. side when it comes to our policy toward North Korea. So I think we are talking about two sides of coin at the same time. So if the talks at the working group between U.S. and South Korea goes really well, I think the prospects for the denuclearization as well as inter-Korea relations are much brighter.
Staying on the same topic, but North Korea has been very opposed to this working group. Do you think their response could be a variable in the future denuclearization process?
So now North Korea is talking about one side of the coin, that they believe that the working group is proposed because U.S. wants to oversight all the process of inter-Korea relations. So that is why North Korean media said they oppose this composition of this working group between U.S. and South Korea. So if there's some progress made by this working group talks between U.S. and South Korea, I think there's no reason for North Korea to oppose this kind of talks between two allies.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for your insights.
Thank you.
And that's where we wrap things up. I'll be back again tomorrow with more on the day's top issues. But in the meantime, stay tuned to Arirang for our later newscast for all the latest updates. Thanks for watching and see you again soon. Goodbye.
(2018) Overseas TV Audience Survey. Arirang TV and Gallup Korea are conducting research on viewer opinions. Your honest answers will be used for the development of Arirang TV. From November 1st to the 24th, you can participate the survey through our website, www.arirang.com. We will send an autographed CD to randomly chosen respondents as a token of our appreciation. We are waiting for your participation.